Hi everyone, and welcome back to another session of ISTQB training Test Automation Engineer certification. In our last video, we covered the test definition layer, and today we will be covering the third one, which is the test execution layer. Okay, so this is the layer in the generic test automation architecture, which supports the execution layer of test cases or test suites. As you can see in the diagram, this layer consists of test execution, test logging, and test reporting. We will cover all these in detail in a while. So this layer provides tool support for executing test cases automatically. Okay, so when we say test cases execution automatically, so test runner is used to execute the test cases. So whatever the test scripts we have written, a test runner is used to execute those tests. And it integrates with IDE, whatever IDE we are using, it integrates with that test engine and other tools. So test can either be executed on a local system, or it can also be done through any CI/CD tool like Jenkins or Azure DevOps as well. So the second one is logging the test case executions. So when we talk about test logging, this is the activity of creating a test log. So what is a test log? A test log is just a record of details about the execution of test. And this is very helpful when a test is failed, as it helps to then go back and analyze that what went wrong and how it can be resolved. So these test logs are attached to the test reports. So usually when we talk about the test reports, which we will do in a while, these test logs are attached with the test reports. So the third one is reporting the test results. So the reporting the test results, which includes details like how many tests passed or failed, etc., how long it took to run the test, then further details about the status of each test, like how many were executed, how many were not executed, etc. So everything, all the details which are related to the test execution of the test, that's covered in test reporting. And screenshots are also captured as part of test reporting for better understanding. Like for example, at some point, if the test has failed and the screenshot is captured, then we get to know exactly where the test failed and what actually went wrong. So these test reports actually help the management team a lot to make decisions about any coming release. Okay, so we have covered the tool support. Now let's talk about the components in this layer. So it may consist of components that provides the following capabilities. The first one is set up and tear down the SUT for test execution. Okay, so now this is a standard way to initialize settings for a system. I'll cover the concept of setup and tear down in a while with the next point. So the next one is set up and tear down test suites, that is set of test cases including test data. Okay, so often while writing the test, we have some setup work which needs to happen before the test run, and sometimes we have some work which needs to be done after the test run. So setup and tear down, these are two methods. So when a setup method is defined, the test runner run that method prior to each test, and likewise if a tear down method is defined, then the test runner will invoke that method after each test. So setup method is before the test run and tear down after the test run. So for example, if there are any records from the database that needs to be inserted or deleted, etc., so that's where setup or tear down method can be used. So I hope that this one is clear now. If you have any further questions, then yeah, let me know in the comments. I'm sure that people who are already doing test automation, they are very much familiar with these two methods. Okay, so the third one is configure and parameterize the test setup. Okay, so this means that we are arranging or putting together what's needed as part of the test setup to execute the test. So whatever tool you are using for test execution, you can configure it and you can add parameters as required as part of the test setup. For example, URLs, environment details, browser, etc. The next one is interpret both test data and test cases and transform them into executable scripts. Okay, so over here then the manual test come into place. So if we already have some manual test, and so we have the test cases which are existing test data as well with those test cases, so we can use them to transform into the executable scripts, because many times it happens that we have some let's say manual regression test and we want to automate them, which means that we already have the test cases in place, we also have the test data, and we just transform them into the executable scripts. So that's what's mentioned over here. The next one is instrument the test system and or the system under test for filtered logging of test execution and or for fault injection. Okay, so let's split this point. The first part is instrument the test system. So whenever we use this term instrument, this means that basically we are equipping the test system with whatever is required. So this means that we are equipping the test system and or the system under test, right? And now what are we equipping it for? We are equipping it for filtered logging of test execution. Logging, test logging we have already covered, and or for fault injection. What is fault injection? So fault injection is a method which where on purpose we introduce errors to a system to ensure that it can withstand and it can recover from a defect or error conditions. So fault injection is intended to mimic the failure behavior that might occur in a specific field or in any specific script, etc. So usually there are two types of fault injection which are like compile time and runtime. So faults are in the compile time, faults are introduced prior to running the software, while in runtime faults are introduced while the software is running. The next one is analyze the system under test responses during test execution to steer subsequent test runs. So over here, like while we are executing the test, how system under test is responding is analyzed and is based on that further test that other test runs are executed. Like for example, let's say that if we have 10 tests in a test suite and we are starting from the first one and the first one is failed and the other 9 tests are dependent on that first test, which means that now if the first test has failed, then the other dependent test will also fail. So it's better to stop right there and continue with another test suite. So that's what's meant by this point, that we analyze the response of the testing. Then there is validate the SUT responses, comparison of expected and actual results for automated test case execution results. So this is like as we do for all the test execution, that we validate the responses, like whether when you are executing any script, then whether the actual result is the same as the expected results. So basically comparing them, and then if they both are same, then of course the validation is there. So we are validating it, then the status changes to passed, otherwise of course it's failed if the expected result is not the same as the actual results, so if it's different. Then we have control the automated test execution in time. Okay, so when we talk about the control of the automated test execution time, then we are talking about the scheduled test. So whenever we are doing automation testing, we can schedule the test as well. Like for example, if we want to run few scripts overnight or over the weekend, we can schedule them, and then we can see, let's say if we are running it overnight, then we can see in the morning that how many tests were failed, and we can review that, okay, what happened, and you can make the changes, and then you can carry on with your own work as well. So actually it comes very handy, especially with regression tests, because most of the time the number of regression tests, they are quite huge. So it's a good practice to run regression test on frequent basis. Maybe you can do it every night as well, or every 2 to 3 days, like after 2 to 3 days every night you can do it, or you can run it over the weekend, and the first thing then you can check in the morning is that, okay, what's the result of the test. So yes, so scheduling of test is also quite handy, and that's part of the test execution layer as well. Okay, so with this then now we have come to the end of the test execution layer. So we will go through the test adaptation layer in the next session, and till then, if you have any question, please leave your question in the comment and I will try my best to answer it. Till then, take care.